Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're doing something absolutely incredible. We're going to shrink right down and embark on this magical, animated, microscopic adventure to discover exactly how living things are built. Have you ever wondered what you, a giant tree, and a tiny insect all have in common? Well, get ready because we're about to find out.
So imagine we're flying high above the Earth. We zoom down into a giant, beautiful, vibrant green forest. Then we zoom even closer, right into a single green leaf. And then we shrink down even more, right into a tiny, microscopic space. Everything alive is made of these tiny living units. But the big question is, what happens when millions of these units work together to keep a whole organism alive?
Okay, let's dive into this by meeting our very first character. Say hello to this cheerful little cell. Now, a cell is the lowest level of cellular organization. Basically, that just means it's the absolute smallest living unit capable of performing all the functions of life. Every single living organism you've ever seen is made up of these tiny, hard-working cells.
Now, some organisms, like an amoeba or a paramecium, are unicellular. That means their entire body is just one single cell. But if our happy little cell here tries to do every single job by itself, finding food, digesting, breathing, moving, it's going to get completely exhausted. So multicellular organisms, which are made of many cells, use a brilliant secret called the division of labor. They smartly share the workload so no one cell has to do everything.
When these cells decide to share the workload, they form groups. And that brings us to the word tissue. A tissue is simply a group of similar, specialized cells joyfully joining hands to perform one specific job perfectly. Instead of one cell struggling to do everything, a whole team of cells works together in perfect harmony.
It's so cool to see how this teamwork actually happens. First, individual cells bundle together to form a tissue, but it doesn't stop there. Those tissues then combine to build larger, much more complex functional structures called organs. Think of things like your brain, your lungs, or your stomach.
Let's take a quick step back and see how this builds smoothly from the ground up, kind of like building blocks. First, single cells group together to form tissues. Next, different tissues combine to form organs. Then, several organs team up into organ systems, like say your digestive system, which uses your stomach and intestines together. And finally, all those organ systems collectively create a complete, living, breathing organism.
If this still sounds a little tricky, just think of it like your school. In school, you have different teams to make things run smoothly, right? You've got sports teams for games, music clubs for concerts, and science clubs for experiments. Well, an organism relies on tissue teams in the exact same way. It has muscle tissues working as a dedicated team for movement, and nerve tissues acting like a messenger team to send signals from the brain to the rest of the body.
So the really crucial point here is that not all organisms need the exact same teams. Think about a stationary tree and a beautiful forest compared to a highly active, running child. The plant stays in one place, so it mostly needs supportive, rigid tissues to hold it up. And actually, a lot of those plant tissues are dead. But the running child, they're constantly moving, so they need living, active tissues like muscles and nerves to fuel all that dynamic, high-energy movement.
For today's adventure, we're going to focus on the plants. Let's transform and travel right inside the glowing green structures of a magical plant. Inside, we discover two main paths of cellular destiny. The plant is built of two broad types of tissues, the actively growing meristematic tissue and the specialized fully grown permanent tissue. Let's head to our next destination, the growing tip of a root. Here, we find the meristematic tissues. These are basically the plant's formative tissues. If you look really closely at the root tip and the shoot tip, you'll see tiny young cells dividing rapidly. Their whole job is just to multiply, pushing the plant deeper into the earth and higher into the sky.
So what makes these meristematic cells so special? Well, these energetic little cells are very small and have super thin walls. Because they're working so hard, they are packed full of abundant cytoplasm and have really large, prominent nuclei. And get this, they're tightly packed together with absolutely no empty spaces between them, no intercellular spaces at all. Their sole purpose in life is to constantly divide and create new growth. As we follow the magical glowing arrows of growth through the plant, we see there are actually three distinct types of this meristematic tissue based on exactly where they live. The apical meristem lives right at the growing tips of roots and stems, making the plant taller. The lateral meristem lives on the sides, which makes the stem thicker. And finally, the intercalary meristem is located near the nodes, helping new leaves and branches emerge. Wow, we've covered so much ground today. Let's quickly review our beautiful adventure map before our final challenge. We shrank down to see how single cells team up into tissues, organs, and whole organisms through the division of labor. We compared stationary plants with active animals, and we explored inside a plant to watch meristematic tissues rapidly divide at the tips and sides to create growth.
Okay, time for a fun challenge to see what you remember from our journey. I'll ask a question, and you take 5 seconds to think of the answer. Ready? Question 1. What do we call a cheerful group of specialized cells holding hands and working together to perform one common function? Think about it.
Fantastic! The correct answer is a tissue. Remember, when cells team up to share the workload, they become a tissue.
Let's move right along to the next question. Question 2. Which magical plant tissue is full of energetic young cells that are tightly packed and constantly dividing to help the plant grow? Take 5 seconds.
You got it. That is the meristematic tissue. Those are the busy little cells responsible for all the brand new growth in the plant.
And here is our final question for today's adventure. Question 3. If you were exploring a plant with a magnifying glass, where exactly would you look to find the apical meristematic tissue? 5 seconds on the clock. Spot on! They're located right at the very tips of the growing roots in the soil and the growing shoots reaching up to the sun, helping the plant increase its height.
You've taken your very first brilliant step into the amazing microscopic world of tissues. But wait, what happens when those actively dividing meristematic cells finally grow up and get permanent jobs inside the plant? What kind of special abilities do they unlock? Well, we're going to discover that fascinating answer when we explore permanent tissues in Part 2. Until then, keep exploring and stay curious.